Presenting my prototype knife sharpener. So the way this works is not very simple. We've got a electric car window motor. It has a worm drive, which then lowers the RPM way down. So then this little plate that spins around goes, I don't know, about 1 revolution a second. And this tie rod takes circular motion and turns it into linear motion by this whole carriage, which holds the actual sharpener. There's 3 parts to this thing. It's an equilateral triangle. This is from Harbor Freight, costs about $10. This is the coarse 180 grit. This is medium, about 220, I don't know. And this is 300 some odd fine grit. And it fits inside this little 60-degree angle, because after all, equilateral triangles are all 60-degree angles, so you can put it in for any particular grit you want. We'll be starting out with coarse grit here. But before we even start out with any grit, is this knife sharp? So we have a add-on here, which is the sharpometer, that tells how sharp the knife is. It has a little extender all thread, 1/4 here, and then it has a hard drive magnet here on the bottom of this thing, which can be placed to hold the metal of the knife. And then it goes over to this copper plate, which I'll explain. But let me explain a little more about the electrics here. So these 2 batteries here are lithium batteries. They're about 4 volts apiece. So since they are in parallel, this is a total 4 volt motor, which is what this guy is. This is a 4 volt switch. So when I pull this towards me, it makes the car window, which is used to having 12 volts, go really slow, like this. Now, in contrast, since this is a 12 volt motor, these 6 batteries, they're actually 3 pairs. That ends up giving a 12 volt thing. So this is a double pull, double throw switch. Pull it towards you, it makes the slow speed, which is for testing the sharpness of the knife. And push it away from you, it goes to 12 volts, which is the sharpening speed, which you can see is quite a bit faster. Now we also have a little momentary on switch here, which is hooked up so that when I turn it on here, it makes a little beep sound. So every time 1 cycle is completed, it tells you you just did 1 cycle of pushing across like that. Now, that's a value because I want to quantify how sharp a knife is by how long it takes a knife to saw through a tomato. So this little gauge here explains that it's actually 7 centimeters per, 7 centimeters per stroke, so 14 centimeters, back and forth. So every time that this little counter adds 1, it just did another 14 linear centimeters of dragging the knife across the tomato. So we can see if this is 2, then that would be 2 times 14, or 28 centimeters of drag before it actually cut through the tomato. Now, how do I know when it's cut through the tomato? Well, I want it to cut all the way through the tomato, and that's where this copper paper sheet comes in. You see there's 2 little leads here that come from this double battery down here that's hooked up to this relay. Now this relay at this point, it's normally closed, which means it's on, so that means power goes from the battery to the motor through the relay. Oh, by the way, before I forget, this gray one is there. It provides the power for the piezo butter, so it can count out. You should get an audio clue how many cycles you've gone through. We can turn that off here, or we can turn it on. But we're going to have it on now because we're going to be running it pretty soon here. So what these 2 leads do is, when they connect to the coil of the relay. And if you listen really closely when I touch here, that is the relay opening the circuit. When it opens the circuit, it turns off the battery voltage going to the motor. So what that means is, when this thing does finally cut through a tomato and touches the copper, since one of these guys is on the knife, and one of them, since one of them is on the knife and one of them is on the copper, then it will complete the circuit, turn on the relay coil, and turn off the motor. So that'll tell us exactly how many strokes. This counts the number of strokes, and this counts the centimeters for the final stroke. So we can quantify the sharpness of the knife with our sharpometer. So let's see how sharp this thing is right now. So we're going to hook up the other half of the electrical turn-off switch. We're now at the counter's reset, and we're at the start. So let's see how many strokes it takes to cut through this tomato. That's one. That's 5. And this is not ready for some fancy chef in a French restaurant, huh? Boy. Well, let's stop at 10 here. Okay, so we got 10 strokes on the counter. And that would be 10 times 40. That's 140 plus 5 more. So that's 145 strokes that we've been able to do. 145 centimeters, excuse me. And so far 145 centimeters has not cut the tomato. So let's try sharpening this guy now and see if we can do any better than not cutting a tomato. Now to do that, I'm going to basically go up to high gear and then have this thing go through the coarse, the medium, and then the fine. Now this is the coarse, that's 180 grit, medium, and fine. So this happens to fit down nicely here because they're both 60-degree angles. So let's run this thing, and now it'll be going at high gear. I'm going to turn off the buzzer because that sounds obnoxious. And let's just see what we can do here. So we'll go for high speed and try to sharpen this sucker. Okay, now we're going to switch and go to the medium grit. Okay, and lastly, we're going to go with a fine grit. These are all diamond hone blocks, by the way. Nothing but the finest from Harbor Freight. Now, the whole point of this knife sharpener is to sharpen knives, but also to come up with a way of quantifying how good I am at sharpening a knife. So that's what our whole sharpometer is for, because, you know, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm learning as I go in terms of angle and pressure and whatnot, and how long I need to do it. So let's see here if we actually have a sharper knife now. 3. So 3, 2, 1. So that was one pass, and then 3 more. So we're talking about 1 is 14 plus 3 is, what's 14 plus 3 is 17. So before we did 145 centimeters, now we did 17 centimeters. So do the math here. Let's see, I guess that would be, let's try 5 there. 5, 6, maybe 5. 5, 7, 35. 5, 5 to 10, 13, 10. So over 5 times sharper. Yeah. Okay, so our knife sharpener appears to actually work. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I'm going to go into the kitchen now and chop some veggies for dinner.